I'm standing in front of America's first warplane, Warbird 1. It's a Dh4. When America went to war in 1917, there was no serviceable Air Force. Our allies wanted us support for the air and to fight the Germans. So America decided it would build an Air Force. It had very little time to do this. So they sent a commission to Europe to look at what was available in terms of the kind of Air Force they would like. They knew that what they wanted, they had some pursuit airplanes that their pilots were flying, SPADs, Newports. Those were all French and British design. But they wanted something that would do a little bit more than that. It would be a fast airplane, would serve as a light bomber, would serve in an observation role. So they looked at aircraft that looked like this. What they brought back and analyzed that would be the easiest, they thought, to adapt to American production was the de Havilland 4, the Dh4. There were 4,000 of these ordered by the War Department to serve in the war. The orders went out to 3 companies, the Dayton Wright Company, which got the largest order for over 3,000, the Fisher Body Company, and the Standard Aircraft Company. What's behind us is the Dayton Wright version. Of the 4,000 plus that were ordered, 1,289 went across the pond by ship to France and assembled. They went to 13 air squadrons, Army Air Service squadrons, and 4 Navy Marine squadrons. Within the 13 Army Air Service squadrons, 5 of them were bombing squadrons, and the rest were observation. It's got a large wingspan, it's about 43 feet. Same size of the wingspan as the Jenny that many of the pilots that learned to fly it were trained in. These airplanes didn't arrive in France until the summer of 1918. And they served for about 3 months. By November of 1918, the armistice was signed and the war was over. So all those airplanes that remained in the States that hadn't been shipped yet were immediately put into other service, and the Army being the principal user of these. In the Army, they used these airplanes, since they had so much power and so much fuel capacity, to be the goodwill ambassadors of aviation. They began exhibiting them and flying them in things like transcontinental air races. In fact, 1919, the first transcontinental air race was won by one of these airplanes with an Army pilot and his dog Trixie, which is kind of an interesting notion that he brought his dog with him. But they flew across the United States and won that race. Then they began looking at other kinds of activities this airplane could do. Jimmy Doolittle, a very famous aviator of the time, he basically flew from Florida to California and created the first transcontinental speed record. He did it with 1 fuel stop and did it in 23 hours. Seems like a long time now, but in those days, you have to put it in context, it took you 4 days to get across the continent by train, by fast train. So he did it in 1/4 of the time that the trains were doing it. The Army used it for a lot of different things. They decided, well, one of the combat roles you had is at time on station, it's called. How can we keep our aircraft on station longer? Well, they came up with the idea of air-to-air refueling. There's a famous photograph of 2 Dh4s, one above the other, with just like a gas line down to the other. And that establishes something that is used today. There was a world record that time that was set that the airplane stayed off the ground for 33 hours while it was refueled about 7 times during that 33 hours. So another record was broken. So this aircraft has the record of being the first aircraft used commercially to transport passengers from one city to another. So all the airline legacy is really owed to this airframe. Okay, we're standing in front of this gorgeous American-built, America's first warbird, Dh4. Take a look at this. That's a 9'2" propeller made out of mahogany, multi-layered, and it's in front of this Liberty engine, which is a large engine. It's the largest of the war, 400 horsepower, V12. It's going to power this baby. This is a good view of the cockpit and the engine. There's a wing walk here on the wing. The pilot enters the cockpit on the front side. steps up on the tire, steps up onto the wing walk and into the cockpit there. That's a pair of twin Marlin machine guns, 30 caliber. Right, so this is a symbol of the 50th Air Squadron. It's called the Dutch Girl. It's a symbol that came off of Cleanser, that the mothers of these lads that flew this thing, I'm sure they grew up seeing a can of Dutch Cleanser around, and they used this as their emblem because their motto was we were going to clean the skies over France of all the German aircraft. So they use that as their symbol. The wingspan you can see here is large by today's standards. If you look at some of the other biplanes over here that are World War I biplanes, they're almost half the size. So this is a large airplane that America produced to help win the war by the standards of the day. Everything was, this was 32517 was the air service number, and so all the parts you'll see on the landing gear and other particular places where they'll mark it so that they know that that belongs with that airplane.
All right, we're in the Dh4 cockpit. Two of the most important instruments here will be the stick, which is going to control your elevator and also your ailerons, okay? And then the rudders. So right down here is a rudder bar. You can see that using down here, going back and forth. Now the only thing that would be different in the final and finished Dh4, and when we get ready to fly this, is it'll be a firewall that will go from this area right here. It's an angled piece of metal that hides the engine from the pilot. Right now you can see the engine, which is a unique feature of this because you don't normally get a chance to see the engine when you're at this point. The next thing that you need to do to operate this thing is once you start, you got a mag switch here, you got a compass, you got an airspeed indicator up here, right? And then what's called an altitude or height indicator here. To control the engine, you've got a throttle, which is right over here, and there's two particular pieces of the throttle. There's the retard, which is the lower section here, the handle in the lower section, that's for starting the engine. And then once it's started, you put it into the neutral position here to start it, and then ease it back once you sort of warm up. And then above it is the throttle, which gives you the power to move forward for your departure and of course to control for your landing. Here's a unique feature. This little device here, it controls radiator shutters up front. There's a big water-cooled radiator, and although we don't have them installed yet, there's a series of radiator shutters that go across the front, 12 of them, and this gives you choose whatever position you want to unlock that in. The other unique feature about this cockpit is that right down here is the stabilizer trim wheel. It operates kind of unusually, and you have to push forward, pull it out like this, and then operate forward or aft. And then there are 16 positions that you can put that in, and that will allow you to adjust the pitch of your airplane in flight. The only other thing is that the floors, you can see, there are battens down here, on here and here, that allow you in foul weather, for your mud on your boots to be knocked off and for you to get a grip on things as you fly the airplane. There's a placard that comes with the airplane, and the manufacturers that if you don't have, because of the weight and balance of the airplane, if you don't have an observer in the back, you need to put at least 150 pounds of weight to keep the balance in. So you have to fly it with somebody, or you have to put weight in it. The last thing about the cockpit here that you see is that here's the data plate, and that's the manufacturer. This is the date and right, and you can see it's got the number. There's an image of the aircraft that the factory puts on it before they deliver it to their client, which in this case is the Army Air Service. This aircraft, the finishing elements are going to be put on it after we leave Oshkosh here, and we're planning to begin our test flight program in September. Our goal is to have this in France in October, so we can fly the 100th anniversary of the Medal of Honor flight from the airfield that still exists in France. The organization behind this reconstruction of the Dh4 is a group called Friends of Jenny. We can be found